I caught my cheating girlfriend with my ex-convict roommate, so I exposed them to her family. As Christmas approached, a time that often brings me delight, I found myself in a difficult circumstance. Life has not been kind to me despite my best efforts to be good to others. Some may reply, "Welcome to the club, my friend," but the situation has grown extremely dismal. I used to believe that infidelity was mostly a male issue, but now I realize that women are also capable of it. I don't want to make sweeping generalizations, but I'm speaking from personal experience. The event progressed in such a way that my girlfriend appeared to dislike him completely. But after installing a covert camera, the truth became apparent. It became clear that when I went to work, he had covertly entered my apartment and became engaged with my girlfriend. This guy used to live next door but was arrested and needed somewhere to stay for a few weeks. I frequently questioned why he kept lingering around us. After I kicked him out, he began showing up in locations we frequented, and I wondered who was informing him of our whereabouts. He seemed to be wearing a GPS tracker and was always keeping an eye on us, but finally, the truth emerged. It happened one morning as I finished my shower and prepared for work. My girlfriend was also taking a shower. Suddenly, her phone received a text message notification. In a normal situation, I wouldn't have paid much attention, but my partner was using a new phone with a strange ringtone. I checked the sender, and it was Patrick, my former roommate who had recently been released from prison. We were buddies in high school while both living in Queens. We have many common memories and experiences. Patrick lived with me for a few months before his prison sentence, but everything changed after my girlfriend moved in. He returned 2 months later and stayed with us. Unfortunately, we had a falling out, so I asked him to leave. He was only intended to stay for 2 weeks, but it stretched into 2 months, and paying over $22,000 for a small 2-bedroom apartment in New York was already challenging. Because he sat on the couch in the living room, there was a lack of personal space, making communication difficult. In January, we intended to sign a new lease and relocate to a better, more expensive apartment. Next month, my girlfriend would be able to welcome her family and friends without feeling embarrassed. It's crucial to clarify that Patrick and my girlfriend did not have a close relationship. She was supportive when I asked him to leave. They met recently when I let him stay with us briefly, so I was startled to see him texting her that morning. I didn't even realize they were texting. A notification appeared on my phone screen displaying their chat. My name is Caleb, and my girlfriend and I knew a Patrick, but she didn't know anyone else with that name. In addition, her friend Patrick, whom I had not previously known, inquired about another Caleb. It felt like a huge coincidence. I realized she was talking to my former neighbor, whom I had kicked out 2 weeks ago due to his extended stay. I couldn't foresee a relationship between my fiancé and Patrick, especially because she agreed with my choice to remove him from our life. But the feeling of discomfort persisted, implying that something was amiss. I never considered romance. Perhaps they went out together for a smoke or another activity. He had talent for other things, but he was obsessed with being a rapper and spending money on studio time. When he lost his employment, he always returned to street dealing and illegal narcotics, but he was never arrested and only served short prison sentences. This cycle repeated indefinitely. Allow me to paint a picture for you. I grew up in a predominantly impoverished area of Queens, where my parents are still happily married. As a child, I struggled financially, yet I never went hungry. I'm grateful to have grown up in a diverse community that exposed me to several cultures. The majority of my friends during my formative years were of African heritage. I didn't imagine I'd have a relationship with someone of a different race because all of my past partners were African American, but fate had different intentions. It all began around a year and a half ago when I met my present girlfriend while working as a courier. We exchanged funny remarks, and I jokingly invited her out, expecting to be rejected. I became a delivery driver, which eventually led to our love. She's a wonderful young professional in her early 20s with a stunning figure that accentuates her beauty. When we initially met, she lived in a posh neighborhood with a neighbor. I'm a simple person who doesn't require much in life, just enough money to pay the rent and a devoted girlfriend who won't cheat on me while I work hard. At first, I felt I had found it all in my present girlfriend, and I treasured our time together. After 7 months of dating, I completely trusted her. We felt like we could create a steady future together, which meant no more pricey dates, pubs, and clubs. At the time, I had a roommate named Patrick, but the lease was exclusively in my name. Patrick was unable to sign the lease due to his poor credit and lack of rental history. My lease expired after 8 months, and my girlfriend's agreement was related to her neighbors. We both agreed that when her lease expired in 4 months, we would look for new and better housing. It was our next move as a pair. She wanted to reside in the East Village or Lower East Side, which is comparable to where she currently lives. I resided in Washington Heights, which she did not enjoy. Fortunately, her job was in the East Village, which matched her desire to be close to work. My delivery job did not bind me to a specific place, but I did have to consider the apartment my partner preferred, even though it cost $1,500 more than my existing one. A single bedroom cost around $30,500. The plan was for her to temporarily move in with me and my neighbor after her lease expired. After my lease expired, we'd move to the apartment she preferred. Patrick had hoped to become famous in music since he was 16, but it had yet to materialize despite investing money in studio time. His music went largely unnoticed, and he was trapped in a maddening loop. He skipped steady occupations in favor of buying and selling drugs, which resulted in failed drug tests and job losses, delaying rent payments. Unfortunately, I let him move in, which I now regret. After being dismissed, he turned to selling drugs on the streets to make ends meet, and he was frequently jailed. This pattern has been going on since he was 16, and I felt foolish for allowing him to get so close to me. Predictably, 4 months before the lease expired, he was arrested and imprisoned. I was the only one on the lease, so I was responsible for the rent. Despite his many arrests, I allowed him to stay with me. Unfortunately, he remained in prison. I thought he'd change and get a career like mine, but he was determined to succeed in the music industry. In brief, when my girlfriend's lease expired, she moved in with me, and we began a new chapter in our relationship. We lived together for a while, but our quiet life was upended a month later when Patrick was released early from prison. Surprisingly, when Patrick returned, his belongings were missing from our shared flat. Patrick had nowhere to go and wanted to stay with me for 2 weeks until he could figure things out and move in with relatives. Given our limited space, I paused. I told him that our 2-bedroom apartment was already too cramped for me and my fiancé, and adding another person would make matters worse. However, after discussing it with my girlfriend, we agreed that she had never met Patrick and knew only what I had told her about him. Surprisingly, he moved in the same day. I made it clear that my girlfriend's consent was contingent on him remaining for only 2 weeks. He agreed, promising to remain discreet. Surprisingly, within a week, he had learned to be a respectful couch surfer, not encroaching on our privacy and returning when we were getting ready for bed. Although we rarely saw him, we knew he was there and admired his efforts to keep his belongings organized. So, we didn't notice the first 2 weeks had passed, but in the 3rd and 4th weeks, I would get home late from work to find him watching TV with my girlfriend. While there was nothing wrong with it, I found it unusual. He knew I'd be late and timed his arrivals accordingly. I assumed he had a cordial connection with my girlfriend, but they rarely spoke when I was there. Despite our best attempts to keep things tidy, our small apartment nevertheless seemed crowded and suffocating. As the 5th week approached, I got more anxious that Patrick had extended his stay beyond the allotted 2 weeks. I felt for my girlfriend and assured her that he would go as planned. One evening, while lying in bed, I decided to confront her about the matter. I wanted to apologize on Patrick's behalf and reduce the tension in the air. Although Patrick had not caused any problems between us, the cramped living arrangements seemed to have an effect on our intimate relationship. It had been 4 weeks since our previous closeness, and I felt compelled to confront it. I wanted to discuss Patrick's failure to keep his initial 2-week pledge with my partner. I expected her to support me or at least reply, but instead she turned away and went to bed as if I were in her way. On reflection, I remembered that life was normal for the first 3 days after Patrick moved into our apartment. However, on the 4th day, she began to refuse intimacy. Given that my partner was normally busy at those times, I assumed her behavior was related to discomfort during Patrick's 3-day stay with us. She became noticeably noisy during intimate moments, although knowing he was in the living room. I was struck by the fact that for the first 3 days after he arrived, our bedtime routine was especially loud, almost as if she was doing it on purpose. Surprisingly, starting on the 4th day, it considerably increased my self-esteem. My partner routinely refused any bedtime activities, often using Patrick's presence as an excuse. It was unusual because she hadn't been as cautious in the first 3 days despite Patrick's presence in the living room. I didn't think much about it, but after 6 weeks I conveyed my displeasure to Patrick, telling him that his time was finished. It disturbed me that my partner continued to avoid intimacy because of him. I noticed his persistent presence, which looked like a purposeful sort of retribution. Almost 2 months had gone by, and she was still making the excuse that we had a guest in our apartment. I reminded Patrick that he had agreed to depart a month earlier, but he cleverly moved the responsibility to other concerns and persuaded me to let him stay another week. Furthermore, I recall other instances in which Patrick and my girlfriend were both missing for extended periods, which made me anxious. One time, I decided to leave work early since I was feeling ill. My partner normally arrived home around 5:30 in the evening, so I went to the apartment door and unlocked it. I heard disturbance inside the flat and suspected a break-in because neither Patrick nor my girlfriend were generally home at the time. I rushed inside and noticed the television was turned on. Patrick pretended to be immersed in it, but any spectator could see his weird and uncomfortable demeanor. Meanwhile, the sound of running water signaled that my girlfriend was in the shower. This unusual situation raised suspicions that something nefarious was going on between them. Although I lacked clear evidence, their presence in the apartment at the time was enough to raise suspicions. Plus, I was confident that my partner would not engage in such actions. To handle the matter, I asked my girlfriend about her early return home. Her response was that she took a half-day off work. The explanation did not persuade me, and I was dissatisfied because of my terrible health that day. I didn't investigate the subject as deeply as I should have, but I couldn't shake the idea that there was a link between them. The following day, my girlfriend abruptly brought up my talk with Patrick about him moving out. To my astonishment, she acted as a middleman for him, asking that we extend the deadline by a week or more and not put him under pressure. Given that we were leaving the apartment in January, I thought it was weird that he utilized her as an intermediary to extend his stay with us. He had previously pledged only 2 weeks, and I expected him to fulfill his word. I had already spent a significant amount of time away from my typical surroundings and bed life, and now she was suddenly on his side. This incident severely disturbed me, and our disagreement over it did not continue long. Thankfully, she eventually admitted I was correct. At times, it felt like I was on my own in my attitude, and I was concerned that if we let him, he would become a chronic freeloader, continually sleeping on the couch to evade his rent duties. Sometimes, I wished he was back in prison. He had a knack for finding trouble quickly, and he had a habit of putting himself in it. This all occurred in November, during the same week that we spent together looking for the right wedding ring. It was a well-planned event that we had been working on for weeks. The selection, which included her in the ring, was intended to ensure her complete delight and pride in wearing it for the remainder of her life. At least, that was the plan. We had been talking about getting married even before she moved in with me, and we had been methodically preparing for it for weeks. Our ultimate idea was to sign a lease for a new apartment in December. I decided to propose on Valentine's Day in January, knowing how much she enjoys romantic gestures. In the evening, we went to acquire wedding rings. We finally had the chance to be close after a 7-week hiatus. It was a special reward for purchasing the rings, and a gentle reminder of the closeness we had lost due to the guest in the living room. The following week just fueled my desire for the closeness we enjoyed. I borrowed $4,500 from my savings, totaling $41,000, to purchase the engagement ring she desired to surprise her on Valentine's Day. I kept it hidden somewhere she wouldn't find it accidentally. But the next day, my girlfriend reminded me that it had been nearly 2 months since Patrick began living with us, which caught me off guard. In the evening, I met with Patrick and told him he had only 1 day to find another place to live, or I would have to remove his belongings myself. He claimed he had nowhere to go, which irritated me. I conveyed to him that it was not my problem. At that moment, my girlfriend emerged from the bedroom, and our voices grew louder. I aggressively pushed Patrick to cease relying on me and locate a place to live or turn to his relatives for aid. It was clear that his relatives didn't want him around due to his unreliability. Even his acquaintances in our social circle, who, as it turned out, were of African descent, didn't want to accept him. The confrontation escalated, nearly turning physical. I warned him that if he didn't leave my flat that night, there would be consequences. I decided to contact the authorities to ensure they would handle this situation properly by putting him behind bars. I expressed my disappointment, making it clear that his lack of gratitude prevented me from helping him. He left that evening but returned the next morning to pick up his things. By the end of November, it was clear that he was out of my life for good. There were rumors that he found shelter in a rundown house about 2 miles away from me, which wasn't surprising given the lack of support from his acquaintances, but it puzzled me that he didn't seek refuge with his relatives instead of living in a place that could lead him back to prison. I couldn't fathom his reasoning. I often wondered why he insisted on staying in the area despite the lack of job opportunities and the high costs of maintaining the studio for his unsuccessful music career. It was in the first week of December that I discovered why he was so determined to stay. I was at a bar with my girlfriend when I saw him discreetly leaving the room. His presence there struck me as odd. This scenario repeated several times in different places, and I later found out my girlfriend had been exchanging text messages with him. This discovery made me wonder if he was tracking our location through GPS, as he often showed up in places where we were trying to avoid him. Trying to make sense of this unsettling situation, when I mentioned it to my girlfriend in a joking manner, to my surprise, she admitted that she found his behavior disturbing and creepy as well. I learned that she had given him our location, allowing them to meet secretly and engage in intimate relations in my car while I waited inside an establishment, completely unaware of her actions. This incident occurred during our second visit to her parents in upstate New York. The first visit had been unpleasant due to her father's disapproval of me. My girlfriend informed me that he preferred her to marry a man with a higher education, not someone like me. While his words were different, his intentions were clear. I realized that was the message he wanted to convey. Her father, an arrogant and irritable college professor, believed he was superior to me. He saw himself as an intellectual giant, constantly lecturing me and treating me as a suspect. I disliked him, and it was evident that he thought his daughter deserved someone better. Despite my girlfriend's efforts to make her father accept me, it became clear that we wouldn't see eye to eye. She wanted us to visit her parents' home before Christmas so they could get to know me before we celebrated the holidays together. I tried to be polite to her parents, but they proved quite challenging. They expressed a desire to visit my girlfriend and see where she lived now, but she insisted they wait until we moved to a nicer apartment in the East Village or Lower East Side. She was afraid that if they saw the condition of our neighborhood and apartment, they would be disappointed. We were planning to sign a lease for a new apartment in 2 weeks, just a few days before Christmas. The following week, I found a notification from Patrick on my girlfriend's newly purchased phone. Without knowing the nature of their communication, I saved a record of the message. My main feeling was confusion rather than suspicion, as I'd never seen my girlfriend as someone who would betray my trust. As she finished her shower, I wanted to capture the text message as proof. While driving to work, my thoughts were preoccupied with the dynamics of the relationship between my girlfriend and Patrick. I had many questions about his messages, particularly the ones about my work schedule, which raised suspicions about a possible connection between them. I recalled how she used to be vocally expressive during our intimate moments while Patrick lived in my apartment. I couldn't help but think about how she chose her outfits when Patrick was around. The lack of intimacy, which she attributed to Patrick's presence, also weighed on my mind. I remembered numerous instances when I unexpectedly returned home to find both of them in the house. I thought about his sudden appearances in various places and her unexplained disappearances for short periods. Gradually, everything began to make sense, and my suspicions of their affair intensified even before my work shift ended. Throughout the day, I wrestled with emotions of worthlessness, anger, and confusion. I desperately hoped that my conclusions were wrong, as my life revolved around this woman. Without her, I might have moved to Florida by now. A friend in Florida had made me a tempting offer 3 months ago, offering $500 a day after taxes for transporting cars in a certain region of the United States. However, as my relationship with my girlfriend deepened, I understood her reluctance to leave New York and her family. I made the resolute decision to stay in my apartment. On the same day, I received a text notification. I decided to verify my suspicions. To do that, I chose to buy a pair of high-quality hidden video cameras with excellent resolution. The plan was to discreetly install them in my bedroom and living room, to remotely monitor the situation through Wi-Fi and receive real-time updates on my phone. Capitalizing on the evening while she slept soundly, I expertly placed the cameras in their designated spots with great care. I connected them to the Wi-Fi network, ensuring uninterrupted communication with my mobile device. Before heading to work the next morning, I carefully checked the cameras, ensuring they remained hidden and operated optimally. I strategically concealed the cameras in various spots and then left with my phone, ensuring it was synchronized. Typically, my girlfriend and I had different work schedules. She left for work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I left at 5 o'clock, so I expected several days would pass before the cameras recorded any significant events. However, I was shocked by the reality. Just half an hour after I left the apartment, the camera's motion sensor went off like crazy. At that moment, I was leaving the subway. I stood in the middle of the station, trying to comprehend the shocking scene unfolding on my phone. Initially, I thought it was my girlfriend who had triggered the motion sensor, but when I looked at my phone, I saw Patrick's presence on the screen. To my bewilderment, he was already in my apartment, passionately kissing my girlfriend in the bustling living room. Commuters hurried by, paying no attention to the heartbreaking scene I was witnessing, and I stood there in complete bewilderment. How could this happen? Then it dawned on me that Patrick must have been hiding nearby, patiently waiting for me to leave for work. My girlfriend was standing there, completely naked, draped only in a white towel over her head. I was at a loss, unable to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. As I weaved through the crowd, my legs grew weaker, and eventually, I had to find a seat at the nearest station. To my amazement, they began engaging in intimate acts right on the couch in my living room. I was both surprised and captivated by their ease and comfort. It was evident that this affair had been ongoing for a long time, all unbeknownst to me. The realization that I was running late for work suddenly hit me, yet I felt a strange indifference. It seemed that at that moment, my life had lost all meaning. Everything I once treasured was shattered, and I felt utterly defeated. The rage inside me reached a boiling point, and I was overwhelmed by an irresistible desire to seek revenge against these two individuals. While watching the camera recording, my supervisor suddenly called, causing the recording to pause. I was annoyed by his interruption, but he questioned my lateness and warned of potential consequences if I didn't arrive within 30 minutes. This skepticism and anger led me to impulsively quit my job, abruptly ending the conversation. When my supervisor attempted to contact me again, I intentionally ignored his call until the subway neared its destination. By then, I realized they had already finished their actions, and I thought with regret about the time it would take me to get back home. I couldn't believe their audacity. As the subway train continued its journey, I couldn't shake the feelings of betrayal and regret washing over me. My girlfriend, whom I trusted and loved, had deceived me in the most terrible way. The thought that she had gone to work as usual that morning filled me with a bitter mix of anger and disappointment. It was a stark reminder of my own ignorance, failing to see the truth that was unfolding right before my eyes. Minutes passed, and the adrenaline that had fueled my impulsive job resignation gradually dissipated. It was replaced by a wave of regret and self-doubt. I couldn't help but chastise myself for making such a hasty decision. I suddenly realized how important my job was to me. Deep down, I understood that it would be futile to seek my old position back. The damage had been done, and it seemed too late to salvage what I had lost. The weight of my mistake pressed heavily on me during that solitary subway ride. Before this incident, I had always viewed my girlfriend as loyal and devoted. The idea that she might betray me had never crossed my mind. Now I had to confront the painful truth that she had been having an affair with a man I considered my friend. Disbelief and heartache intertwined, making that subway ride the saddest of my life. I had always shown kindness to these people, repeatedly offering my assistance even when his family had rejected him. I had shown understanding, but in return, my girlfriend and friend treated me cruelly. How could I trust a woman who had an affair with my friend? The idea of proposing to her on Valentine's Day seemed unthinkable. Early in the morning, around 8 o'clock, I removed my work clothes and collapsed on the bed, crying like a helpless child. It felt as though all my achievements had been wiped away, and I was essentially starting from scratch. I found myself in a tough spot. I had lost my job and my girlfriend, and now I was uncertain about what to do when the lease on my apartment expired. Moving in with my ex-girlfriend wasn't an option due to our breakup, and without a higher-paying job, I wouldn't be able to afford my apartment in 2 months. Finding another job was challenging, especially with so many candidates vying for the same positions. I had already informed my landlord about my intention to move out, and now I was in a state of limbo. Although I briefly considered reaching out to my former employer in the hopes of being rehired, I was pretty sure I had already been fired. Even if I were to apologize, it seemed unlikely that it would salvage the situation with the abundance of candidates interested in the job. Thankfully, Florida offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of my despair. I decided to change my circumstances and turn to a friend who, along with his wife, ran a car transportation company in Florida. Although he had previously offered me a driver's position, I had declined due to my girlfriend's reluctance to leave New York. However, now, desperate for a fresh start, I reached out to my friend. Unfortunately, he didn't answer my call, prompting me to contact his wife, who played a significant role in the business. She managed the company's website, handled accounts receivable, and took phone calls when her husband was on the road. She informed me that there was still an open position and asked if I could come to Florida. I agreed and said I could visit the next day to inspect the place. As a result, I planned to book a ticket to Florida. Currently, I had $3,500 in my bank account, and by returning the engagement ring today, I would receive $4,500 in compensation, giving me a total of $8,000. While contemplating my future, I began to feel a sense of optimism. The idea of leaving without informing my ex-girlfriend was becoming increasingly appealing. I wondered if anyone could truly understand my dire situation. I received strong recommendations to follow this path, with the main advice being to leave, endure the shocks, relinquish the desire for revenge, and disappear from her life completely. I had pondered this idea for a while, but it initially seemed too simplistic to me. My anger toward both her and her lover fueled my desire for revenge. Yet, in the end, I recognized the most crucial aspect of this plan: ending it all and severing all ties with her, never to meet or communicate with her again. My vanishing act was tied to her repeated attempts to contact me, and I longed for it all to be over, wanting to see her reaction personally. Surprisingly, the guys involved also longed for closure. I spent the entire day alone in my apartment, providing ample time to contemplate the actions of both my girlfriend and the former friend who had turned out to be my roommate. As a result, I concluded that the most appropriate retaliation would be to keep all information about my intentions to myself and reveal the news to her at the very last moment when she least expected it. When I returned home that evening, I could barely contain the urge to engage in an argument with her. In my eyes, she appeared malicious, vile, and wicked. I couldn't fathom her motives for such a betrayal. Despite losing all affection and desire for her, I decided to maintain a facade of indifference, pretending that I was unaware of anything that night. As we lay together, restless thoughts consumed my mind. What could have driven her to such actions against a man she had professed her love for? It occurred to me that perhaps this affair had started only a week after his arrival, and I wondered if it served as a means to humiliate and disgrace me. She may have been intrigued by being with a man of a different race, like indulging in a forbidden fruit or conducting an experiment. I couldn't think of any other reason for her actions. Before going to bed, I informed her that I had to go on a 4-day business trip to Florida, as required by my company. I suggested she sign an apartment rental agreement in my absence, assuring her that I would sign an addendum when I returned. The leasing company had already checked our credit, and our combined income was sufficient for the housing. She agreed to the plan. I booked a flight to Florida, which turned out to be the most expensive ticket I'd ever purchased. However, despite the cost, it was worth it because I couldn't stand living in the same apartment with my girlfriend any longer. The thought of her infidelity in my own bed while I was at work disgusted me. It was unnerving to realize that my girlfriend was most interested in the timing of my flight, presumably to inform her lover of the ideal time for their rendezvous. I couldn't help but wonder how long she intended to continue this affair. Having once proposed to her, I contemplated the future. Would our story continue in our new apartment? Would it proceed after marriage and the formation of a family? These thoughts made me grateful that I wouldn't be around for those significant moments. Feeling despondent, I decided to create some distance from her. The next morning, I told her that I had to leave early. Even though I had rearranged the camera the day before to capture a better view of our living room and bedroom, I ensured that I saved a video recording of their activities on a portable hard drive. It was almost predictable. As soon as I left the apartment, Patrick, her partner in the affair, wasted no time entering. Their actions fell into a routine. Fortunately, a strategically placed hidden camera managed to capture their facial expressions, her loud and obnoxious screams, and even their intimate moments. What surprised me most was their complete disregard for protection. It was thoughtless of her to put my health at such risk. Besides, Patrick had recently been released from prison, and I couldn't help but wonder about the diseases he might have contracted there. In my unstable life situation, I was concerned about potential health risks, especially regarding various diseases. With this in mind, I mentally noted that I would definitely get tested upon arriving in Florida. Just before boarding the flight, I managed to get in touch with my friend, who explained the driver job opportunity in detail. Luckily, I already had a CDL license, so I only needed additional training to upgrade my skills. While it won't be easy to drive across the entire country, I genuinely enjoyed being behind the wheel, and the compensation is nearly 3 times what I used to earn. Plus, I dream of owning a spacious house in Florida with a large backyard, a far cry from New York, where most of my income goes into renting. Such real estate won't come cheap. Even though I'm unsure about the exact date of my trip, I have enough time to contemplate my next steps. Maybe I should heed my friend's father's advice and return to school once I've saved up enough for tuition. Right now, everything feels uncertain and unresolved. I'm overwhelmed with emotions, making it hard to make a rational decision. I have video recordings of those 2 days when something unexpected occurred, and I've saved these recordings on my portable hard drive. The hidden camera I used activates when there's movement, meaning it only records when there's motion detected. The camera's memory was sufficient to keep recording until I returned from my 4-day trip to Florida. Upon arriving in Florida in the evening, I discovered that my friend had left for deliveries and decided to take a cab to his house. To my surprise, his wife was home. My friend and his family live in a magnificent Florida residence, and seeing their prosperity filled me with joy. We grew up together in Queens, so their success felt even more remarkable. Comparing their grand home to my small New York apartment couldn't help but seem comical. Nevertheless, I felt optimistic about embarking on this new chapter of my life in this place. During our conversation, my friend expressed strong disapproval of Patrick, whom he had warned me to stay away from many years ago. Unfortunately, I didn't heed his advice. Ironically, I now find myself grateful to Patrick for revealing my girlfriend's true nature. If it hadn't been for him, someone else might have uncovered her deception. Who's to say it could have been another person of African descent? During my visit to my friend's house in Florida, I decided to review the recordings from my camera in the evening. To my complete shock, I saw Patrick in my home, eating my food, occupying my bed, and engaging in intimate activities with my girlfriend on the same bed. The depth of this betrayal became unbearable. Initially, I had planned to address it with her after she moved to a new apartment, but witnessing this blatant lack of respect in my own bed pushed me over the edge. Yet, I realized that taking matters into my own hands would lead to negative consequences. The thought of seeking revenge crossed my mind, but I quickly recognized the potential fallout, such as ending up in prison for a significant portion of my life. Instead, the next day, I decided to contact her father and give him the keys to my apartment. My plan was to include videos that showed his daughter engaging in an intimate relationship with a person of another race to provoke a strong emotional reaction. I began making duplicate keys to my apartment. The next morning, I saved and transferred the recording of their intimate encounter to a USB drive. On the same day, I sent it to her father using an express delivery service. Initially, I had considered contacting her father directly, but I lacked his contact information. Then I searched for him on the college's website but only found the number to his office. I persistently called his office multiple times until he finally answered. He recognized me, and I took the opportunity to reveal the truth about his daughter. I explained that she had asked me to accompany her on a trip to visit relatives, emphasizing that we weren't romantically involved, just friends with benefits. I was one of her many lovers, the person she lived with and dealt in illegal substances. I informed him that, as a gesture of goodwill, I had made copies of her apartment keys and suggested he visit her at 8 o'clock in the evening, the optimal time. I intentionally didn't mention the presence of video recordings, unsure of how to explain that aspect. After our phone conversation, he remained silent. I assumed he might be shocked by the unexpected information I had shared and was awaiting the inevitable consequences. Alternatively, he could suspect it was a hoax, although I strongly doubted it, perhaps due to the extensive information I provided. I was sure that upon receiving the package he would believe me, though I wasn't certain if everything would go according to plan. While going about my own business, I took the opportunity to familiarize myself with the upcoming living arrangements. My friend's wife kindly briefed me on how their business operated, essentially bringing me up to speed. Late in the afternoon, my friend returned, and his family and I went out for dinner. To avoid drawing attention to my own situation, I turned off the camera notifications. However, around 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, something suddenly struck me. I decided to discreetly check the camera while dining with my friend and his family. Given the sensitive nature of this story, I didn't immediately share it with my friend. Stepping out of the restaurant, I quickly examined my phone and was pleasantly surprised that this was the moment I had been anticipating for my revenge against my unfaithful partner. To my amazement, her father unexpectedly arrived at my apartment, accompanied by 3 young men around 25 years old. Assuming these were either his sons or their friends, I mentally replayed the scenario. They seemed caught off guard when they entered the living room. My ex-girlfriend and her lover were engrossed in watching TV, but their peaceful moment was shattered when her father and several men entered the room. Patrick, in a t-shirt, appeared bewildered, and my ex-girlfriend hurriedly attempted to cover herself, remaining in her underwear. Her father began berating her, expressing his disappointment with her lies about her boyfriend. In that tense moment, it seemed to me that I foolishly hoped for a different outcome, perhaps wishing that the situation could be resolved without resorting to physical measures. However, my ex-girlfriend didn't get the chance to express her thoughts. Her father categorically prevented her from doing so, showering Patrick with degrading insults, some of which were too offensive to repeat. I observed the bewildered look on her face as her father accused her of betraying her family and demanded an explanation for her actions. Her reaction was truly priceless. She appeared completely confounded, not knowing where to begin. I couldn't help but find the situation amusing, and her father's frustrated, angry, and arrogant demeanor was incredibly satisfying to witness. It was hard to bear seeing a beloved child entangled in something he despised. Her father relentlessly scolded her, hurling degrading insults at Patrick, and seemed ready for a confrontation with the 3 men accompanying him. It was clear he anticipated Patrick's involvement. It's no wonder he came prepared for any outcome. However, at the first opportunity, Patrick hastily retreated, leaving my ex-girlfriend alone. Her father continued his verbal onslaught, nearly disowning her but not severing family ties. The most remarkable part is that I recorded the entire incident on video. After her father's departure, she was left in a state of shock and isolation. Overwhelmed with emotion, she called me with tears in her eyes, anxiously asking when I would return. Little did she know that I had orchestrated this entire scenario, forever rupturing the bond between father and daughter. Their relationship would never be the same, and she had only herself to blame for these irreversible changes. During our phone conversation, she expressed a desire to confess something but couldn't discuss it over the phone. I advised her to wait until my return home for a face-to-face conversation. I tried to console her, urging her to stop crying and assuring her that I would be back in 2 days, ready to listen to her problems. To my surprise, the next morning, she didn't invite Patrick for an intimate meeting. It seemed the fun had suddenly ended. As I later learned, she had no way to contact me. Despite this, I couldn't help but grin because she had brought this situation upon herself. Now she'd have to face the consequences of her actions. Later that day, I received the results of an STD test which came back negative. It was on the day I was supposed to fly back to New York that she finally discovered I was the one responsible for unveiling the truth. Presumably, her mother had informed her about the situation. As I headed to the airport, she called me and admitted to her infidelity. I realized she had pieced it all together. She mentioned that I had gone to extreme lengths, secretly recording and destroying her family, which she considered unnecessary. I explained how she had wrecked my life, especially as I was on the brink of getting married. She somehow managed to find 2 hidden recording devices and threatened me with a lawsuit upon my return to New York. I decided to consult with my lawyer to determine if she had a valid claim. It remains uncertain whether she genuinely has one. As an excuse for her unfaithfulness, she simply attributed it to a desire for a better life, indicating that Patrick didn't matter to her at all. The way she spoke suggested an attempt to downplay the seriousness of the situation. It seemed as if she expected me to just move on. I made it clear that our relationship was over. Everything between us had ended, and my intention was to return to New York, collect my belongings, and then relocate to Florida. In response, she threatened legal action for invasion of privacy and creating adult content out of revenge. I stood my ground and told her to go to hell. The only regret I have is that I didn't give her a chance to explain herself. I'm curious to know how her relationship with Patrick began. From what I gather, it probably started about a week after he moved in. It would be intriguing to hear the story from her perspective. I now reside in Florida, where I work in car transportation across the southern regions of the country, occasionally making stops in the north. The latest news about my ex-girlfriend reveals that she has finally found a new roommate. Her relationship with her father has completely disintegrated since he wants nothing to do with her. As for Patrick, his whereabouts are unknown. To be honest, I don't know, nor am I interested in, his fate. What matters most is that I've learned that things turned out terribly for my ex-girlfriend after my revenge and the strained relationship with her family. She suffered from severe stress and developed psoriasis. Her body and face were covered in painful rashes, causing not only discomfort but also a loss of self-esteem. Once a beautiful girl, now she goes unnoticed by men, and I can't find it in me to feel sorry for her, given the pain and suffering she caused me. As I settled into my new life in Florida, the weight of New York's chaos began to lift, replaced by the humid air and endless horizons of the South. The job driving cars across state lines was grueling but freeing. Long hours behind the wheel gave me time to think, to process, to rebuild. The open road stretched before me like a promise, each mile a step away from the betrayal that had nearly broken me. Yet, even as I carved out this new existence, the ghosts of my past lingered, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. Had I done the right thing? Was my revenge worth the cost? And why, despite everything, did I still wonder what she'd say if we faced each other one last time? 3 months into my Florida chapter, I was living in a modest rental near my friend's sprawling house. The place was nothing fancy, a 1-bedroom with a creaky porch and a view of palm trees swaying in the breeze. It was a far cry from the suffocating 2-bedroom in Washington Heights, where every corner held memories of her and Patrick. My days were filled with work, learning the routes, and bantering with other drivers, most of whom had their own stories of leaving something behind. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a beer, the hum of cicadas filling the silence, and try to make sense of it all. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from an unknown number, but the area code was unmistakably New York. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from her since that final call, when she'd accused me of destroying her life. I'd blocked her number, deleted her from my socials, and done everything to erase her from my world. Yet, here was a message, simple and cryptic. "And Caleb, I know you're gone, but I need to talk. Just once, please." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, to keep moving forward. I'd built something here, a job that paid well, a chance at a house with a backyard, maybe even a future where I could go back to school like my friend's father had suggested. But another part of me, the part that still woke up at 3 a.m. replaying the moment I saw them on that camera, wanted answers. Why had she done it? Was it really just a fling? Or had there been something deeper, something I'd missed? And why, after all this time, did she want to talk now? I didn't respond that night. Instead, I called my friend's wife, Lisa, who'd become a sort of confidant since I'd arrived. Over coffee the next morning, I showed her the text. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she read it. "You don't owe her anything, Caleb," she said, her voice firm but kind. "But if you're still carrying this around, maybe hearing her out will let you put it to rest. Just don't let her drag you back into that mess." Her words stuck with me as I drove a sleek convertible to a client in Georgia that day. The road blurred past, and I thought about what closure really meant. I'd thought revenge would give it to me. Watching her world crumble when her father stormed into that apartment had felt like justice. But now, months later, I wasn't so sure. The anger had faded, replaced by a hollow ache, a sense that I'd won a battle but lost something else. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe I needed to face her, not for her sake, but for mine. When I got back to Florida, I texted the number, "N1 call, that's it, tell me when." The reply came almost instantly. "In tomorrow, 8 p.m. your time, thank you." I spent the next 24 hours wrestling with what I'd say. Part of me wanted to unleash everything, the hurt, the betrayal, the way her actions had upended my life. Another part just wanted to listen, to finally understand. At 8 p.m. sharp, my phone rang. I stepped onto the porch, the evening air thick with the scent of jasmine. "Hello?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Caleb," she said, and just hearing her voice again was like a punch to the gut. She sounded different, tired, softer, like the confidence I'd once loved had been worn down. I don't know where to start. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I am." I didn't respond, letting the silence stretch. She took a shaky breath and continued. "I messed up, Caleb. Not just with Patrick, but with you, with us. I was scared of where we were going, of signing that lease, of getting married. It felt like everything was moving so fast, and I didn't know how to tell you I wasn't ready." "So you slept with my friend?" I cut in, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "No, it wasn't like that," she said quickly. "Patrick, he was there, and I was weak. It wasn't about him. It was about me feeling trapped, like I was losing myself. I know that sounds like an excuse, and maybe it is, but I never meant to hurt you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see her as the woman I'd loved, not the one who'd betrayed me. But another part saw through it, a story she'd told herself to justify what she'd done. "You could have talked to me," I said finally. "You could have said you were scared. Instead, you lied, every day in my own house." "I know," she whispered, "and I hate myself for it. I've lost everything, my family, my confidence, my health. I'm not asking for pity, Caleb. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy, working on myself. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation felt like it was circling a void. She didn't ask me to come back, and I didn't offer. When I hung up, I sat on the porch staring at the stars. I'd wanted answers, but what I got was a glimpse into her regret, her own brokenness. It didn't erase the pain, but it made her human again, not just the villain in my story. The next day, I drove to the beach, something I'd started doing when I needed to think. The waves crashed against the shore, and I thought about what Lisa had said about putting things to rest. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd kept the video recordings from the apartment. I hadn't watched them since New York, but I'd held on to them, a tether to my anger. My finger hovered over the delete button. Did I need them anymore? Did they define me, or was I more than the guy who'd been betrayed? I didn't delete them, not yet. Instead, I walked along the shore, letting the salt air clear my head. Back in New York, she was rebuilding, just like I was. Maybe she'd find peace, maybe she wouldn't. Maybe her father would forgive her, or maybe that rift would last forever. As for Patrick, I'd heard through a mutual friend that he'd been arrested again, caught up in the same cycle he'd always been in. I didn't care enough to find out more. What I did know was that I had a choice. I could keep carrying the weight of what they'd done, let it shadow every relationship, every chance at happiness. Or I could let it go, piece by piece, and build something new. Florida wasn't just a place. It was a chance to be someone different, someone who didn't need revenge to feel whole. As I drove home, the road stretching into the dusk, my phone buzzed again. Another text from her. "Thank you for listening. I hope you're okay." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The ocean was behind me, the stars were above, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Whether I'd forgive her, whether I'd delete those videos, whether I'd ever trust like that again, those were questions for another day. For now, I was here, alive, and that was enough.